My husband Mason is the only man I know who can lose a client, spill bourbon on his own tie, and still call it networking. The room laughed before I did. Vanessa stood under the warm auction lights with a champagne flute in one hand and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. She kept going, adding details that turned a bad week from 8 years ago into a little dinner theater performance. My clients were laughing. My coworkers were laughing. Even the auctioneer gave her that look people give when they think someone is being brutally honest and charming at the same time. I sat at table 12 with my hands folded around a sweating water glass and felt my face go hot. It was a charity auction at the Westerville Country Club, the kind of polished Columbus event where everyone wore navy blazers, expensive watches, and the same practiced expressions. I was there because half the room either bought from me, sold to me, or wanted something from my region by next quarter. In my world, reputation mattered. A man in construction supply didn't need to be flashy, but he needed to look steady, reliable, hard to shake. Vanessa knew that better than anyone. We had been married 19 years. We lived in a 2-story house outside Dublin with trimmed hedges, a stamped concrete patio, and framed family photos lining the upstairs hallway. From the outside, we looked settled, successful enough. Our daughter, Leah, was in college now. Vanessa worked in marketing, moved easily through rooms like this, and always knew how to make strangers feel included. That was part of the problem. She knew exactly how to work a crowd. At home, before the dinner, she had stood in front of the hallway mirror in a dark green dress, fastening earrings, and asked, "You're not wearing that striped tie, are you? It makes you look like a substitute math teacher." I had laughed then. Or pretended to. I changed the tie. That was how these things usually happened. A comment. A jab. A story told just loud enough. If I let it pass, the night moved on. If I pushed back, she would tilt her head and say, "Oh, come on, Mason." It was a joke. At the podium, she paused for another sip and said, "Honestly, if there's one thing I admire, it's my husband's confidence. You have to be very confident to explain the wrong delivery date to a room full of contractors like you're teaching a Bible class." Another wave of laughter rolled across the room. I looked down at the white tablecloth, at the auction booklet by my plate, at the fork I hadn't touched. My biggest client, Ron Baines, was grinning into his drink. A younger rep from Dayton kept glancing at me, then away. I could feel the shift in the table. That subtle easing people do when they decide, together, who the joke is about. Vanessa smiled into the microphone, waiting for me to play my part. I didn't. I pushed my chair back slowly. No speech. No scene. I buttoned my jacket, set my napkin beside the plate, and walked out while the laughter was still hanging in the room behind me. By the time the ballroom doors shut behind me, the air in the lobby felt colder than it should have. I kept walking past the coat check, past a glass case full of golf trophies, past 2 women in black dresses lowering their voices when they recognized me. Outside, the November wind hit hard enough to wake me up. My SUV was parked under a yellow lot light near the edge of the club. I got in, shut the door, and just sat there with both hands on the wheel. Through the windshield, I could still see the building glowing against the dark, all that soft light and polished stone, and people inside pretending they were kind. I didn't start the engine right away. I could still hear the laugh that followed her last line. Not just the room's. Mine. The fake one I used to give on instinct, the one that said I was easygoing, that I could take it, that everyone should relax because this was normal. I hadn't given it tonight, but I knew the shape of it. I'd worn it for years. When I finally pulled out of the lot, the road was almost empty. Columbus at night in late fall had that flat, quiet look to it. Traffic lights reflecting on wet pavement. Closed storefronts. Gas stations humming under fluorescent light. I drove with the radio off and let the silence do what it had been trying to do for a long time. It brought back everything. Vanessa telling my boss at a Christmas party that I needed written instructions to grill chicken. Vanessa laughing with neighbors about how I once got lost driving to Hocking Hills, like a man missing one exit was proof of something larger. Vanessa leaning across a dinner table and saying, "Mason means well," in that bright, polished tone people use for children and confused relatives. Each memory came with the same pattern. The room laughed. I smiled. She touched my arm later and said, Don't be so sensitive. And I let it go because I thought keeping the peace was the same thing as being a good husband. Somewhere on 270, with the city lights sliding past the driver's side window, I realized something that made my grip tighten on the wheel. She hadn't just been doing it for years. She had been getting better at it. The timing was cleaner now, the details sharper. She knew which stories made me look clumsy, weak, forgettable. She knew when clients were listening. She knew how to make cruelty sound social. And I had helped her. Every time I laughed along, every time I told myself it wasn't worth a fight, every time I chose quiet over self-respect, I had handed her permission and called it patience. That thought sat heavy in the car. By the time I turned into our subdivision, I wasn't angry in the loud, wild way I would have expected. I felt something colder than that. Clearer. For the first time, I wasn't asking myself how to smooth things over when she got home. I was asking myself why I ever thought this was love. The house was dark when I walked in. No TV. No music. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the wall clock in the kitchen. I hung my jacket on the back of a chair instead of the closet. Didn't bother with the lights right away. I knew the layout well enough to move through it without thinking. 19 years will do that. I poured myself a drink without measuring. Bourbon. 2 fingers, maybe 3. The glass clicked softly against the counter as I set the bottle down. I took a sip, felt it burn just enough to remind me I was still in control of something, and then I walked into the dining room and opened my laptop. The screen lit up the room in a cold, pale glow. For a minute, I just stared at the blank document. Then I started typing. At first, it was slow. One memory at a time, like pulling something stuck out of mud. Christmas party, 2012. Told my boss I can't follow simple recipes. Enter. Neighborhood barbecue. Joked I don't know how to use a drill properly. Enter. Dinner with Ron Baines. Mason gets confused with numbers. I paused after that one, fingers resting on the keyboard. I remembered the exact look on Ron's face that night. The polite smile. The quick glance at me to see how I'd react. I had laughed. Of course I had. I kept going. The list started to build its own rhythm. Dates. Places. Exact phrases when I could remember them. If I couldn't, I wrote the feeling instead. Made me sound incompetent. Turned mistake into personality trait. Everyone laughing. Me agreeing. I took another sip of bourbon and kept typing. Some entries were small, almost forgettable on their own. Car ride with friends, said I'd get lost in my own driveway. Phone call on speaker, Mason overthinks everything. But seeing them lined up, one after another, they stopped being small. They formed a pattern. A clean one. It wasn't random. It wasn't occasional. It was consistent. Controlled. Almost practiced. Like she had been refining a character over time, shaping it carefully until it fit perfectly into any room she walked into. And that character was me. I leaned back in the chair and looked at the screen. The document had grown longer than I expected. A full page. Then more. Each line another piece of something I had refused to name. This wasn't teasing. It wasn't humor. It was positioning. In every story, I was the same version of myself. Slightly incompetent. Slightly slow. Harmless enough to laugh at. Safe enough to dismiss. And she was always the one telling it. I felt something settle into place in my chest. Not sharp. Not loud. Just steady. For years, I thought we were a team. That whatever she said in public was balanced by what we had in private. But sitting there looking at that list, I understood something I should have seen a long time ago. There was no balance. There was an audience. And I had been cast in a role I never agreed to play. I heard her car pull into the driveway a little after 10. Headlights slid across the living room wall, then disappeared. A car door shut. Heels on concrete. The front door opened with that familiar soft click, followed by the rustle of her coat and the faint scent of her perfume moving through the hallway. I didn't move from the dining table. The laptop was still open in front of me. The list sat there, quiet and complete, like evidence waiting to be acknowledged. Mason, she called out, her tone already edged. Why did you leave like that? I took a slow sip of what was left in my glass before answering. I didn't feel like staying. She stepped into the dining room, setting her clutch down a little too hard on the table. Her dress still looked perfect. Hair in place, makeup untouched, like nothing had happened, except something had. "You embarrassed me," she said, crossing her arms. "Do you have any idea how that looked? People were asking where you went." I studied her for a second, not the words, the posture, the expectation. She thought this was about her. "That's interesting," I said evenly, because I was thinking the same thing. Her eyebrows pulled together. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, closing the laptop halfway, but not all the way. "Standing in a room full of my clients while my wife turns me into a joke isn't something I'm interested in anymore." She let out a short, sharp laugh. "Oh my God, you're still on that?" "Mason, it was a joke." Everyone was laughing. I noticed. "Then what's the problem?" she shot back. "You always laugh. Tonight you just decided to storm out like a child." I felt the old instinct rise up, the urge to smooth it over, to explain, to make it easier. I let it pass. "The problem," I said, my voice steady, "is that it's not one joke. It's years of them." She rolled her eyes, turning away for a second like she was already tired of the conversation. "This again. You're being dramatic." "No," I said, and this time I didn't soften it. "I've been quiet. That's not the same thing." She turned back to me, something sharper in her expression now. "So, what? Now I have to filter everything I say because you suddenly decided to be sensitive?" I shook my head once. "No. You get to say whatever you want." There was a small pause, just enough to make her think she'd won that point. Then I finished it. "But I'm not going to stand there and make it easy for you anymore." That landed. I could see it in the way her posture shifted. Not dramatic. Just a slight tightening, like something in the script had gone off. "You're overreacting," she said, but there was less confidence behind it now. "People joke about their spouses all the time." "Not like that," I said. "Not like you do." She opened her mouth, then closed it. For a second, she didn't have a line ready. So I gave her one. "I made a list," I said, tapping the edge of the laptop lightly. "Every time you've done it." "Where? When?" "What you said." Her eyes flicked to the screen. "And when you look at it," I continued, "it stops being funny." The room went quiet. No raised voices. No slammed doors. Just the two of us standing there, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't the one adjusting to keep things comfortable. She was. 3 days passed without anything changing on the surface. Vanessa moved through the house like she always did. Coffee in the morning. Calls in her office with the door half closed. Short, controlled conversations with me that never touched what happened that night. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just distance wrapped in routine. I didn't bring it up again. Not because I forgot. Because I didn't need to repeat myself. On Wednesday afternoon, I was at my desk reviewing a shipment issue when my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. Indianapolis area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. Something made me answer. "Hello." There was a brief pause. Then a voice I hadn't heard in over 20 years. "Mason." I leaned back in my chair slowly. "Yeah, who is this?" "It's Emily. Emily Harper." For a second, everything else in the room faded. The spreadsheets on my screen, the hum of the office, the conversation from the next cubicle. Emily Harper. I hadn't said her name out loud in decades, but I didn't need time to remember it. "Wow," I said quietly. "That's unexpected." She laughed softly. Not loud, not sharp, just familiar in a way I didn't realize I still remembered. "I know. I wasn't sure if this was still your number." "It is," I said. "How did you even?" "LinkedIn," she said. "You popped up under people you may know." I almost didn't reach out. I glanced at the glass wall of my office, watching my own reflection for a second. Older. Tired in ways I hadn't noticed until recently. "I'm glad you did," I said. There was another small pause. Not awkward. Just careful. "I moved to Indianapolis a couple months ago," she said. "Senior role at a logistics firm. Turns out we overlap with construction supply more than I expected. I saw your company name, And well, it felt strange not saying anything. I nodded, even though she couldn't see it.
Yeah.
Small world.
Very, she said.
We exchanged a few more details.
Work.
Cities. The kind of safe information people use when they're standing on the edge of something they don't want to define too quickly. Then she said, I'll actually be in Columbus Friday for meetings. I was thinking if you're free, maybe we could grab coffee? I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't know, because I wanted to be sure I understood what this was and what it wasn't. This wasn't an escape. It wasn't a reaction. It was a door I had closed a long time ago, suddenly opening without pressure. I can do that, I said finally. Friday works. Good, she replied, and I could hear the small smile in her voice. There's a place near downtown, Fox in the Snow. Around 10? 10's fine. We ended the call without stretching it longer than necessary. I set the phone down and looked at the screen in front of me, but I wasn't reading anything anymore. Emily Harper. Back when I was 23, she had known a version of me that didn't hesitate before speaking. That didn't scan a room before making a comment. That didn't measure every reaction. A version I hadn't thought about in years. I leaned back in my chair again, slower this time. For the first time since that dinner, something shifted. Not relief, not excitement, just a quiet awareness. Some doors don't stay closed because they have to. Sometimes, you just stop checking if they're still unlocked. Friday morning came with that cold, clean kind of sunlight that makes everything look sharper than it feels. I got to Fox in the Snow 10 minutes early. The place smelled like espresso and fresh bread, warm against the chill outside. People sat with laptops, quiet conversations, the soft clink of cups against saucers. I picked a table near the window where I could see the street and ordered black coffee I didn't really need. At 9:58, I saw her. Emily hadn't changed in the ways that mattered. Her hair was shorter now, darker than I remembered, and there were faint lines around her eyes that only showed when she smiled, which she did the second she spotted me. Mason, she said, walking over. Emily. We didn't hug. Just a brief pause, a shared look, and then we sat down across from each other like two people who understood that some things didn't need to be rushed. You look good, she said, studying me for a second. It wasn't flattery. It was observation. So do you, I replied.
She ordered tea.
Chamomile. I remembered she used to drink that during finals week back in college. I didn't mention it. I just noticed. For the first few minutes, we stayed on safe ground.
Work.
Her move to Indianapolis. My role, my territory, how the industry had shifted over the years. The conversation was easy, but not shallow. She listened without interrupting, asked questions that made me think before answering. Not once did she fill the silence just to avoid it. At some point, she tilted her head slightly and said, You seem different. I gave a small smile. Different how? Quieter, she said. Not in a bad way. Just measured. I looked down at my coffee for a second. The surface had gone still. Life does that, I said. She didn't accept that answer right away. I could see it in the way she watched me, not pushing but not letting it slide either. What happened? She asked. Simple question. No weight added to it. No assumptions. I could have deflected, kept it professional, talked about work stress or market shifts. Instead, I said, I got used to making myself smaller than I should have. She didn't react with surprise. Or pity. Why? She asked. I leaned back slightly, exhaling through my nose. Because it was easier than dealing with what happened if I didn't. She nodded once. Not agreeing. Just understanding the structure of the answer. And now, she asked. I met her eyes. Now I'm not sure it's easier anymore. That was it. No dramatic confession. No long explanation. But something shifted in the space between us. She didn't reach across the table. Didn't soften her voice or try to reassure me. She just said, You weren't like that before. I know. You used to walk into a room like you belonged there, she continued. Even when you didn't. I let out a quiet breath. That sounds like a different person. She shook her head slightly. No. It sounds like the same one, just buried under a few years of the wrong environment. That landed harder than I expected. Not because it was emotional, because it was precise. We talked for another hour. Not about the past in detail, not about anything inappropriate, not about what could have been. Just conversation. Real conversation. The kind where I didn't feel like I had to prepare my responses before speaking. When we stood up to leave, she adjusted her coat and said, "I'm glad I called." "Me too," I said. And I meant it in a way that had nothing to do with nostalgia. As I walked back to my car, I noticed something I hadn't felt in a long time. I wasn't rehearsing anything in my head. I wasn't thinking about how I'd sounded. I wasn't preparing for a correction. For the first time in years, I had just been myself for an hour straight. And nothing bad happened. When I got home that afternoon, Vanessa was already there. Her car was in the driveway, engine still ticking as it cooled. Inside, I could hear her voice before I even took off my coat. Low. Controlled. Not the bright, social version she used in public. I paused in the hallway. I said I'd handle it. She was saying, sharper now. "No, not tonight. I told you, just stop." Silence. Then quieter, almost a whisper. "I'll call you later." I stepped into the kitchen as she ended the call. She turned too quickly. Just a fraction of a second, but enough to notice. Her phone was still in her hand, screen dark. She set it down on the counter, like it weighed more than usual. "You're home early," she said. "So are you." She shrugged, already reaching for a glass. "Meeting got canceled." I nodded once and walked past her, opening the fridge without really looking inside. I could feel her watching me, not openly, just enough. "Long day?" she asked. "Normal," I said. That used to be enough. Small talk. Neutral ground. A way to pass each other, without friction. Now it felt staged. I grabbed a bottle of water and leaned against the counter, unscrewing the cap slowly. Her phone lit up for a second from a notification. Just a name. No message preview. Tyler. The screen went dark again before she noticed I saw it. Or maybe she did notice. Her hand moved a little too fast, flipping the phone face down. Casual if you weren't paying attention. Obvious if you were. "Everything okay?" I asked, my tone flat. "Yeah," she said quickly. "Work stuff." "Tyler?" I said like it was nothing. There it was. A flicker. Small, but real. Her shoulders tightened, just slightly. "He's on the branding side," she replied. "Why?" "No reason," I said, taking a sip of water. "You just said, work stuff." Thought I'd connect the dots. She let out a short breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "You're reading into things again." Again. I didn't react to that. Just nodded like I accepted it. But I didn't. Over the next couple of days, I started noticing more. She took calls outside. Not always, but enough to stand out. The back patio door sliding open late in the evening, her voice dropping the second she stepped out. She started carrying her phone with her, room to room, even to the laundry area in the basement, which she used to treat like a place to escape from everything. And when I mentioned Tyler one more time, just in passing, tied to a marketing campaign she told me about, her reaction came too fast. "Why do you keep bringing him up?" she snapped. I held her gaze. "I don't. I've said his name twice." She looked away first. "It's work, Mason. Not everything is a story." That word again. Story. I almost smiled at that. Because for years, she had been the one telling them, shaping them, controlling how they sounded and who looked like what inside them. Now, for the first time, I had one forming that she wasn't managing. I didn't confront her, didn't accuse, didn't raise my voice. I just started paying attention. Patterns. Timing. Small shifts in behavior that didn't match the version of normal she was still trying to present. And underneath all of it, something else started to settle into place. Her jokes. Her timing. The way she chipped at me in public. It didn't feel random anymore. It felt like distraction. Like if she kept me small enough, long enough, I wouldn't look too closely at anything else. I tightened the cap on the water bottle and set it down on the counter. For the first time, I wasn't trying to fix what was happening. I was trying to understand it, and I had the feeling that once I did, there wouldn't be anything left to fix. I didn't confront her. That was the first real change. The old version of me would have asked questions too early, pushed for clarity, tried to force honesty out of someone who wasn't offering it. That version needed resolution. This one needed information. On Monday morning, I called in a favor. A guy named Curtis I'd met years ago through a contractor dispute, quiet, methodical, the kind of man who noticed things other people missed. He'd left law enforcement and now worked private cases. Nothing flashy. Mostly background checks, infidelity confirmations, financial tracing. I need discretion, I told him. You're calling the right person, he said. I didn't give him a speech. Just names. Vanessa. Tyler. Her office. Basic schedule patterns. He didn't interrupt. Just listened, asked for a few specifics, then said, "Give me a few days." That was it. No drama. No assumptions.
Just a process starting.
At the same time, I started separating myself in ways she wouldn't notice immediately. I moved part of my income into an account, under my name only. Not everything. Just enough to create distance. I reviewed our joint expenses more carefully, not confronting, just observing. Patterns again. Timing. Amounts that didn't match what I knew about her schedule. And I stopped reacting to her. If she made a comment, I let it sit. No correction. No participation. The absence of my usual response created a space she didn't seem to know how to fill. "Did I say something wrong?" she asked once, after a remark that would have normally gotten a polite laugh from me. "No," I said calmly. "You said exactly what you meant." She didn't like that answer.
Good.
With Emily, things stayed clean. We spoke twice that week. Short calls. Work-related on the surface, but real underneath. There was no flirting, no blurred lines, no late-night emotional dependence. Just clarity. She asked about my business ideas once, something I hadn't talked about seriously with anyone in years. "You ever think about going independent?" she said. "I used to," I replied. "Had a plan at one point. What happened to it?" I paused. Then I said, "It stopped making sense financially." That was the answer I had always given. This time, it didn't feel complete. That night, I went back to my laptop. Opened old files I hadn't looked at in years. Projections. Supplier contacts. Territory maps. And then I saw something I hadn't paid attention to before. Emails. Threads where I had tried to move forward on certain deals.
Expand.
Shift suppliers. Small strategic risks that could have turned into something bigger. Each one had friction.
Delays.
Miscommunications. Budget concerns that seemed to come out of nowhere. At the time, I chalked it up to timing. Now I wasn't so sure. I cross-referenced dates. Some of those interruptions lined up too cleanly with conversations Vanessa had claimed were just advice from her side. Marketing insights. Financial caution. Suggestions to keep things stable. Stable. I leaned back in my chair, eyes on the screen. Curtis was pulling one thread, but there was another one already in my hands. And the more I followed it, the more it looked like the life I thought had stalled on its own might have been quietly held in place. Not by chance, by someone close enough to guide it without being questioned. I closed the laptop slowly. For years, I thought I had been standing still. Now it felt like I'd been positioned. Curtis called on Thursday. No greeting. No build-up. "I've got enough," he said. I stepped out of my office and closed the door behind me. "Go ahead." "They've been meeting regularly," he continued. "Lunches during work hours at first. Then evenings. Last 2 months it escalated." I didn't say anything. Just listened. Hotels. Not in Columbus. Short drives out. Dublin, sometimes further. Keeps it off the radar of people who might recognize them. A pause. "She's using a shared account. Not large withdrawals. Controlled. Meals, gifts, a couple weekend bookings." My grip tightened slightly on the phone, but my voice stayed level. "You're sure?" "Yes." Another pause. Then more specific. "His name's Tyler Grant. Divorced. Works as a branding consultant. Clean record. No overlap socially with your circle. This is contained." Contained. That word sat wrong. "Send me everything," I said. "You'll have it in an hour." The line went dead. I stood there for a moment, phone still in my hand, staring at the wall like it might shift if I looked long enough. It didn't. When the file came through, I didn't open it right away. I finished my workday first.
Calls.
Emails. A pricing adjustment for a contractor in Dayton. Normal things. Controlled things. By the time I got home, the house was quiet. Vanessa wasn't back yet. I poured a drink, sat down at the same dining table, and opened the file. Photos first. Grainy, but clear enough. Her car. Different parking lots. Him stepping out of his. Casual. Comfortable. Familiar in a way that doesn't happen by accident. Then one of them together. Outside a hotel entrance. Close, but not touching. Like they didn't need to. I moved to the receipts.
Dates.
Times. Amounts. All of it lined up with the gaps I had started noticing. The calls. The late returns. The defensiveness. Then the messages. Not everything. Just enough. Careful language. Planned meetings. Small jokes that felt too easy. Too practiced. I leaned back slowly, letting the silence settle around me. There it was. Not a suspicion anymore. Not a pattern I was trying to understand. A fact. And with it, something else became clear. The jokes. The stories. The way she cut me down in rooms full of people. It wasn't just habit. It was positioning. If I was the incompetent one, the forgettable one, the man people didn't take seriously, then no one would question her. Not her time. Not her decisions. Not her distance. I closed the laptop halfway, staring at the edge of the screen. For years, I thought I had been losing ground slowly. Confidence. Presence. Direction. But I hadn't been losing it. She had been redistributing it. Taking pieces of it in public, over and over again, until the version of me people saw matched the version she needed them to believe. Small. Safe. Replaceable. I picked up the glass, finished the drink, and set it down with a quiet, controlled motion. No anger. No shouting. Just clarity. I reached for my phone and sent Curtis a single message. Thank you. That's enough. Then I sat back in the chair and looked around the house. Same walls. Same furniture. Same life. Only now, I could see what had actually been happening inside it. And more importantly, what was about to end. She got home at 8:17. I knew because I was already sitting at the dining table, laptop closed, the printed copies laid out in front of me in a clean, precise stack. Not messy. Not emotional.
Organized.
Controlled. She walked in like any other night. Keys in the bowl. Coat on the chair.
Phone in her hand.
Mason, she called. In here. Her heels slowed as she stepped into the dining room.
She saw me.
Then the papers. A pause. What's this? She asked. Sit down, I said. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just final.
She didn't argue.
That was the first sign she felt it. She pulled out the chair and sat, eyes moving over the pages but not touching them yet. What is this? She repeated. Proof, I said. I slid the top photo toward her. She looked at it. And for the first time in 19 years, Vanessa had no expression ready. No, she said immediately.
Too quickly.
This isn't. There's more, I said, sliding the receipts next.
Dates.
Payments. Locations. Her breathing changed. Subtle, but uneven now. You went through my accounts? She snapped, trying to regain ground. Our accounts, I corrected. Silence. Then anger. This is insane, she said, pushing the paper slightly. You hired someone? You're spying on me now. Yes. No hesitation. That stopped her again. You don't get to act like the victim here, she continued, louder now. You've been distant, cold. I know, I said. That caught her off guard. I know exactly when it started. I continued. Right around the time you did. Her mouth opened, then closed. I leaned forward slightly, hands resting calmly on the table. I don't care about your excuses, I said. I don't care how it started. I don't care what you tell yourself to justify it. I tapped the papers once. I care about facts. She looked at me like she was trying to find the version of me she was used to. The one who would soften. The one who would negotiate. He wasn't there. You made me small, I said, my voice even. On purpose. In public. Over and over again. She shook her head, but there was no strength behind it now. That's not. It is. I cut in. And it worked. For a while. I let that sit. Then I added quieter. Not anymore. The room felt different now. Not tense. Empty. Like something had already ended, and we were just standing in the space it left behind. I've already spoken to a lawyer, I said. The process has started. Her eyes snapped back to me. You're serious? Yes. What about the house?
Leah?
Everything we built. I held her gaze. You should have thought about that before you needed me to look like a joke to feel better about yourself. That landed.
Hard.
She leaned back slowly, like the weight of it finally reached her. For the first time, she had nothing to say. The divorce was quiet. No dramatic fights. No public scenes. Just paperwork, timelines, and decisions. She tried, once or twice, to shift the tone, to soften things. But I didn't meet her there. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. Leah took it better than I expected. We talked, honestly. No blaming. No stories. Just truth. And slowly, things started to rebuild. I moved into a smaller place first. Temporary.
Clean. Mine.
Then I started working on the idea I had buried years ago. Independent supply. No safety net. No hesitation. This time, no one was there to advise me to stay small. Within a year, I had my first contracts. Smaller clients at first, then bigger ones. The same people who used to laugh at those dinners now took my calls differently. Funny how that works. Respect doesn't disappear. It just waits for you to stop giving it away. Emily stayed exactly what she had been from the start.
Clear. Honest.
Present. We didn't rush anything. No overlap. No escape. Time passed first. Then, gradually something real formed. Not built on distraction. Not built on damage. Built on recognition. Of who I was. And who I wasn't willing to be anymore. One evening, months later, I found myself at another industry event. Different venue. Different crowd. Same kind of room. Someone made a joke across the table.
Light.
Easy. All eyes shifted for a second. Waiting. I took a sip of my drink, met their gaze, and said calmly, "That's not how it happened." No smile. No performance. Just truth. The moment passed. The conversation moved on. And for the first time, I wasn't the story anymore.